Hello, it's Greg Otten here with MaritimeGardening.com, and today I'm just going to do a garden update for those that are interested. Come take a walk with me in my garden. Well, hello, I'm here by the sea. Good morning, it's April 3rd here in beautiful spring Nova Scotia, and then today I'm going to plant some squash in my tulip garden. Hi, it's Greg Otten here with MaritimeGardening.com. I'm going to talk about garlic. So here we are at the entrance of the garden, and if you look to the left here, these are boxes that are made of logs that are designed to be composting stations, but to be honest, I kind of use them like hugelkultur beds. If I take it a little closer here, they're full of horse manure and leaves and seaweed and rotten logs and stuff like that. And as you can tell by these pumpkins, they're fairly productive. I mean, this is, you can see that. Whoa. Good sized pumpkin, right? I got a number that size. I got one further on there. Look over here. Got another nice one right here. That one's almost 16 inches long, to be exact. There's one growing down here. See that? Down there. And you can see these pumpkins. I train them up this hill here, and they go way up the hill. So the furthest away they've grown, the actual vines, I would say 30 feet from down here where they were planted. And I'm not going to go up there right now, but if you go up the hill, there's pumpkins all over the place in the hill. And all of that is growing in these boxes here. 1, 2, 3, 1 cubic yard boxes just full of rotting material and about 4 inches of horse manure on top. And each box has about 4 pumpkin plants growing in it. So that works great. The previous year I grew potatoes in here, and that worked out fine too. So entering the garden, there's the doorway that we were just looking at from the other perspective. I've trained pole beans up this fence here, and they're growing all along here. And there's different kinds of greens, lacinato kale and Swiss chard and stuff like that growing down in the bottom there. And at the very edge down there of the logs, there's different herbs, savory, oregano, thyme, there's one other one, sage, I think, yeah, sage. The reason I planted herbs down there is that if I didn't plant stuff at that edge, the very edge where the log meets the walkway, herbs would grow there, or not herbs, weeds would grow there, so I thought I might as well just plant something, because if I don't plant something, weeds will grow. So that's where I plant most of my herbs. So that's all coming on great. It's the middle of September, and these bean plants are still producing. And these are the only beans I really have producing now. All my bush beans are done. This is zone 6 gardening. It's a fairly cool zone 6. We don't have a lot of growing days here, despite the fact that it doesn't get too cold in the winter. It's a unique sort of zone 6 area. What else is going on here? If you've been following my videos, I've got a variety of day neutral strawberry here, and pretty extensive strawberry garden. Just walk through it here. All the way down to there. And it's producing straw. I just picked a bunch yesterday. So every 3 days I get a bowl full of nice red strawberries from this. So that's nice to get strawberries in September, and they'll keep going right up until October. For those that didn't watch the episode the other day, this is where I planted all my carrots in the spring. They're doing great. Parsnips are doing great. You look over here. There's an episode where I said I was going to plant squash in my tulip garden, and that's this garden right here. And so it's the middle of September now. I've got nice patty pan squash. I'm picking them for, I don't know, about 3 weeks right now. And I've been pickling them, also cooking them. They, you know, if you've never grown this variety before, they grow very fast. And you can cook them like a zucchini. You can also make a relish. If you like zucchini relish, just use that recipe for these and make zucchini relish with them. And you can also pickle them just using any recipe that would work for cucumbers. You just pickle them. So I've been making lacto-fermented pickles with these, and they're turning out fine. I had some today and they're good. So it's just a garden. I had tulips here, and once the tulips were all done, I planted the squash. So that's a good indicator if you're in this zone, zone 6 to zone 5, I would say. When your tulip flowers start to look ratty, that's when it's time to plant squash seeds. When I planted the seeds for these squash here, I would say half the seeds germinated. So maybe if I waited another week, it might have been a little bit better. But once the tulips, the flowers started to fall apart, that's when I put the seeds in, and they germinated without any special tricks or anything else. I just stuck them in the ground and walked away, watered them every 3 days, and they came out fine. Here's a garden that was all bush beans, and they're completely done. There's a number of different varieties here, Provider, yellow beans, and Romano beans, and they're all pretty much done. I mean, there's the odd bean in there, but I'm just leaving them, and the ones that are still around, I'll use them for seeds for next year's crop. But they're done being productive, which is good, because I was getting kind of exhausted dealing with all those beans. We were eating buckets and buckets of beans. Everybody in the family was complaining. It's good having lots of beans, and it's very healthy, but man, you can only eat so much beans. Look over here. If you're in a zone like mine, adjust this camera here. This is tomato garden here. Number of different varieties: Scotia, Rutgers, and what's that called? Starfire Improved, and a couple rogue tomatoes. If you look, you zoom in here. This plant seems to have made some sort of aroma. Looks like a plum tomato of some kind. I never planted that. That just happened. So sometimes things just happen in the garden, and that's wonderful. Anyway, where I am here, my tomatoes are just starting to turn red. If you're in a really cold place and your tomatoes are just starting to turn red, you're not alone. That's just the way it goes. Bush bean garden here, all completely done. This is a garden where I had my potatoes, and I've been planting lettuce here, because like a fall green crop. I did a video on that, and they're all coming in fine. Most of these are about 6 inches high now. I planted them mid-August, and doing great. This big plant over here is Swiss chard, which I planted in May. But everything else from about here over is all lettuce that I planted in mid-August. Let me explain a little further. So all the lettuce that's in this entire garden, right, I planted it all in this area, and it came up. And then whenever there was a rainy day, I just plucked plants out of the ground and moved them over into these other rows. So from here over, all these lettuce plants were just plants that were growing over here, very thickly seeded, that I just pulled out of the ground and moved and repositioned. That spaces out the harvest, and it has the effect of succession planting, because when you pick anything up and move it, it sets it back about a week anyway. So that's an easier way to do it. But looks like I'm going to have lettuce right up until sometime in October, romaine lettuce. This is a garden here full of, we got parsley here, Scotch curly kale here, Brussels sprouts over here, and the far left is chicory. This is my first year planting chicory, and there's different varieties of it. This variety tastes terrible. So I don't think I'll be doing chicory again. It doesn't taste anything like the chicory you buy in the store. It's because it's really bitter. It tastes like raw dandelion leaves, and some people defend dandelion leaves, but dandelions don't taste good raw. You got to cook them. That's my opinion. Anyway, maybe there's some other variety that tastes delicious. Maybe they're better cooked. I don't know. But my idea was to plant a kale salad garden where I have Scotch curly kale, Brussels sprouts, and chicory, which are ingredients that go in a kale salad. But the chicory is so unbelievably bitter. I'm not happy with it. I mean, do the plants do well? Well, you be the judge. Look over here. So the chicory plants are huge, and they've gone to seed and flowered and bolted and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, they were a big, beautiful, magnificent looking plant. But in the flavor department, you snap off a leaf and taste it. It's very bitter. Not happy with it. Here we've got a garden with zucchini. All these plants are about 3-4 feet high, doing great. Over here is pickling cucumber. They're just about done. They've been producing like crazy for the better part of a month, and I'm kind of sick and tired of picking cucumbers. So I'm fine with that. I left a couple to get really big to use for seeds. So let me show you here. We got this monster here. That's a big cucumber. It's probably 9 inches long and about 3 or 4 inches wide. And if you know anything about pickling cucumbers, it's supposed to be about 4 fingers in length and an inch or 2 wide. So this is way bigger than that. But I've let it just, and they're not normally orange like this. They're green, just like a pickle, right? But if you leave them on the vine, you pick a plant that seems to be very vigorous and looking really good. Left it on the vine, and I'm going to save the seeds and plant that next year and see how that does. Because this variety did extremely well in my garden. The variety was called Russian Pickling Cucumber from Mackenzie Seed, $1.99 a pack, and I planted a 4x10 garden of them, and I had all the pickles I could ever want in a growing season. I couldn't conceive of wanting any more pickles than this, or any more cucumbers than this. They're not a bad eating cucumber when they're small. Once they get big, they're kind of bitter and they don't taste very good in a salad. They have to be picked when they're small, 4 inches long, no longer, to be tasty. And the same with pickling. They're better if you're going to pickle them to pick them when they're short like that. There's still the odd one being produced on the vine, but for the most part they're done. So this is middle of September, and my pickling cucumbers are done. And these were all started under a dome. If you look at that hoop house video, they germinated about 3 weeks earlier than they had any business germinating, because I had a hoop house over them, an artificial environment that heated the soil ahead of schedule. And I'll be doing that next year because it worked so well. I had a garden here where it was called, I think the video was called companion planting peas and potatoes. So the peas are all completely done, and I've put some of the pods aside for saving the seeds for planting next year. The pea here was Alaskan bush pea, and again, it's a Mackenzie seed. The Mackenzie seeds provided a good deal of the seeds in my garden to me for free. It's a variety of seed here in Canada that you buy in a grocery store, and I'm not even sure that you can buy them online. Sorry, not grocery store. They sell them in hardware stores and places like that. So it's, not a fancy high-end seed. It's just a regular ham and egger type seed. But most of my garden is Mackenzie seeds, and I'm really happy with it. They haven't given me any money or anything like that. They just gave me a box full of seeds and said, "Here, try these out and see what you think." So I'm very grateful for that, and I've had as good results with these seeds as I've had any other seed I've ever bought. So I'm perfectly fine with them, and most of them are open pollinated. So some of them are heirlooms, some of them are open pollinated, but all that means is that you can save the seeds and plant them the following year. So I'm happy with that. And set this camera up here. All the potatoes that were growing in here are pretty much still in here. Alright. So this is actually a tomato plant, but that's not going to amount to anything this time of year. But yeah, if I just dig around under this hay here, I've got some nice potatoes, right? Plenty of potatoes. This is Kennebec potato, one of my favorite varieties, very dense. Lots of potatoes here, all over the place. But I'm not going to pick them yet. I just leave them in the ground until my garage gets cool enough to store potatoes. Right now the ground is nice and cool, much cooler than above ground. So I just leave the potatoes in the ground, and around October, October, November, when I get around to it, I'll haul them all out of the ground and just put them in my garage in cardboard boxes, and they'll keep just fine. Here's my first year trying to grow tree collards, and I got the idea for this from another gardening podcast called One Yard Revolution. Patrick Dolan with One Yard Revolution, he grows these. So I found some seeds online and tried to give them a go, and they were getting attacked by pests early in the year, but right now they're doing just fine. I mean, this plant is, try to give you a sense of scale. That's a wide leaf. I mean, I'm 6'4". I'm 6'4" tall. My hand span is about, 7 or 8 inches wide. Right? That's how wide the leaf is. And all you do with these is you just snap off the lower leaves and shuck them like that, and then you just dice them up and cook them like you cook any collard green. You cook it with some bacon and some garlic and some hot peppers, and have that with some some fish or some pork or whatever you like it with. It's a wonderful nice green. So I'm happy with these. I've been eating them for the better part of a month, and I'm doing great. Over here we got Russian kale or Siberian kale. All this kale was direct seeded in my cold frames around the 1st of March, and it germinated, and then I moved it over to this garden in mid-April, early May, I can't remember exactly. It's been here ever since. It's still producing, still doing great. Zoom in closely here, you can see that it's healthy and looking good. Earlier in the season I had to treat it with Safer Zendol to deal with flea beetles, and I had to use slug bait because there were slugs. But now it's doing just fine. I haven't treated this with anything for a month. It's just totally fine, and every 3 days I come and fill a big bowl full of kale, and we have a big meal with kale. So that's a great variety to plant, and this will keep producing until November probably. I mean, as it gets colder it'll slow down, but it'll keep giving us kale for quite a while, so I'm happy with that variety. This variety and Scotch curly kale seems to do really well in this part of the world, better than I've tried. I've got some lacinato kale growing this year, and I try to grow it every year. It never seems to do very well. This Russian kale and Scotch curly kale seems to do a lot better, at least in my conditions here, where it's foggy, cool, coastal sort of area. We don't have ridiculous heat here. I'm not sure if I'm going to get eggplants this year. I got flowers, and I got some teeny tiny looking eggplant. There's one. Look at that slug. Get out of my, look at that slug eating my eggplant. Anyway, I got some eggplants, right? But definitely not any prizes here. But better results than the previous year for sure. Maybe they just require even more heat than what I've got here. Maybe eggplants require being covered all summer long if you're going to get any decent crop. These were covered, these were direct seeded under plastic early May, and I left the plastic on till first week of July, because that's when they were touching the roof. Took the plastic off at that point. Maybe a hothouse is warranted for growing a plant like this. Maybe they're just, and this is a fast growing variety, something like 70 days to maturity it said, but maybe that it's just still not enough heat here for them to do really well. I don't know. Over here I've got peppers, again direct seeded in these cold frames, first week of May. They didn't really germinate till June, and they came along okay. This is a fast growing bush variety with tiny peppers. They don't, the variety that grows here almost look like a Scotch bonnet, but they're not. They're sweet. I could put this in my mouth and eat it right now without having to go to the hospital. So anyway, nothing to brag about. So I've still not found a solution to the pepper paradox here on my property. It may just not be cold enough, or may not be hot enough to grow peppers here without a fully devoted hothouse that's closed in all year long. I really have a problem with hothouses because I don't like having to water plants. I haven't watered my garden at all for a better part of a month. I've got the mulch. Everything has a mulch. It's all exposed to the rain, and everything just takes care of itself for the most part. So I would hate to have to water plants in a hothouse. I'm not sure if peppers and eggplants mean enough to me to have to go through that, because my garden is extremely low maintenance. All I do, I mean, in the spring I plant stuff, and there's a bit of watering involved when you're getting the seedlings going, but other than that, I don't really do any work until I start harvesting plants. So we look here, this is the garden I planted, the Ruth Stout garden. 3 beds of potatoes, actually there's 5 beds of potatoes. 3 of them are planted using the Ruth Stout method, and the last 2 actually way down there are hugelkultur beds. So let's have a look at those for a second. So these 2 box gardens are actually hugelkultur beds. When I built them, I dug up the ground and made a trench and filled the trench full of rotten logs from the forest back there. I just dragged logs up from, you know, if you got a wild forest behind your house, there's rotten logs everywhere. So I just went down there and dragged up rotten logs and put them down about, I don't know, I dug down about 1.5 feet and threw all the rotten logs in the bottom and put the soil back, added a little bit of horse manure, and planted some potatoes. And they're all pretty much dead right now, but I mean, let me just get some view there. If I dig anywhere here, you got nice potatoes. Potato. Potato. Right? Lots of beautiful potatoes. Another one right there. Potato. Nope. Lots of nice potatoes. Sorry, I just heard a wild animal walking around in the woods back here. Kind of stopped me. You never know what's going to wander out of the forest here, so kind of stopped me in my tracks. I didn't know if it was a black bear or a deer or what it was. Anyway, so those potatoes are completely done and ready to be harvested, but as I mentioned before, it's a bit still too warm for me to harvest these, so I'm just going to harvest them as I need them to eat. I'll leave them in the ground until it gets a bit cooler, cool enough to put them in my garage when my garage starts staying below 10 degrees Celsius. Now these Ruth Stout Garden potatoes are starting to look kind of ready. Which tells me that they're starting to be ready. I don't know if we have a look at them. Let's see what's going on. Oh, there's a potato. Not bad. Nice clean potato. We'll see how these turn out. You know, there's some weeds. There's some weeds growing in there. I can see one right there. Let's see, a good sized weed. Ooh, that came through with everything. So it's not completely weed free. If you watch that video, I was pretty lackadaisical in preparing the area. I just mowed this area. Let me show you a more panoramic view. Where these different beds are, I just mowed it down, put down 4 inches of manure, put the potatoes in the ground, and then I put about a foot of hay over top of them. And they've grown, and there's definitely potatoes in there, but how many are there in the area, I don't know. So we'll have to do a video when I harvest these later in the fall, when that's the case. Alright, so just a quick tour and update on how my garden's doing for those that are interested, for those that have been following along, for those aspiring to have a garden on this scale, or those who have a garden on this scale and want to compare notes to someone who's in a similar zone. I'm in technically zone 6, but it's a very cold, foggy coastal zone 6. There's a lot of variance within zone 6. I know people in zone 5 with way more heat and way better results than me. So that's all stuff you have to bear in mind when you're surveying your results and so on. But anyway, this year's been quite good for me. It's been one of the better years. So take that in stock when you're looking everything over. I hope this was helpful. I hope you enjoyed this content. If you did enjoy this content, like us on Facebook. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, and check out my podcast, maritimegardening.com. Until next time, get out there, have fun in your garden, try not to get eaten alive by mosquitoes, and see you next time.